show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go. Face in your face. Face in your face.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Uncommon Sense with Jose Negron. Now, for the benefit of those of you who are not familiar with the channel or watching this channel for the first time, the reason why it is called Uncommon Sense because here on this platform we discuss everyday issues where we try to find logical solutions. But not everyone uses logic. For that reason, it is called Uncommon Sense. I also have another YouTube channel called Latina Diaspora where I discuss issues. Put this in the description. I want to let everybody know that I'm currently live on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Also, the subscriber mode has been enabled for the first 5 minutes, meaning if you're not a subscriber and if you wish to enter a comment in the chat, you will need to subscribe to the channel. As always, I want to give a huge shout out to all those who've already subscribed to the channel. Whether you've been a supporter from the very beginning or just recently joined, I really appreciate your love and your continued support. I also want to give a huge shout out to all those who follow me on social media, as well as those who allow me to enter into your devices and those who watch from the clouds, even the haters. So, what I'm going to ask you to do, if you have not done so already, I'm going to ask you to please subscribe, like, and set the bell notifications to all. So, therefore, whenever I do produce content, you will have the opportunity to catch it live or catch it on the playback. So, as you can see by the thumbnail, the topic is going to be why hate. In other words, why are there people that hate others simply because they're different, whether it be because of their gender, whether it be because they are a different ethnic group or a different skin color, or maybe even a different religious viewpoint. So we're gonna have that discussion. But before we get into the main topic, we're gonna have another episode of In My Words. Now, first of all, I'd like to state to our followers of the Jewish faith, I was want to wish everyone a happy Rosh Hashanah, which is which is New Year's. Okay. Well, most of us, of course, we celebrate uh, New Year's at the beginning of the year, which is January the first. Their holiday is different, based I think it has to do with the moons and things of that nature. But it's for the Jewish people, this is a time of reflection and seeing and asking for for asking for God's forgiveness, which leads to Yom Kippur, which is a day of fasting, which is a day of penance, It is a day of confessing for the sins that they committed throughout the year. So, so it's also a time of reflection. It's kind of like Lent for Catholics and many Christians. The difference is we have a 40-day period. Ours is about a week or so. But from time to time, we all need to reflect. We all need to think about ourselves. When we all need to reflect and see where can we do better as human beings and as people who hold various belief systems. Because many of you know I'm a Christian, so therefore I strive to follow the teachings of Jesus. Of course, as times, um, I would do reflect and see where do I need to do better and where did I miss the mark. Okay, I don't claim to be any better to anybody else. Okay, I'm just a person trying to be as faithful to the teachings of Jesus as possible. And with that in mind, we need to be mindful that our words and our actions has consequences. Some of the good, some of the bad. And with that, we really sorry about that. We all need to be mindful, okay? Because we do realize that uh, not everyone is capable of dealing with accountability. I have a saying, it's not good grammar, but I think it's appropriate. When you mess up, fess up and just own it and strive to do better for the next time. It is called having a moral compass. And of course, we have now entered into the season of fall. The days are starting to get shorter. The temperatures start to get a little cooler. And of course, there are other holidays like Hispanic Heritage Month, which extends from September the 15th to August 15th. Um, also, there are harvest festivals, things of that nature. And then, of course, there is a holiday which I don't observe for multiple reasons, which is Halloween. Now, I don't judge people who do observe Halloween. It's just that I choose not to. Because when you think about the origins and of the customs, it does not paint a pretty picture. Okay. First of all, there is you wear a mask. So you try to hide your appendix. Who does that? The devil. The whole idea of trick or treating, okay, have children go knock on people's doors and ask for candy. Um, Now I know for many parents they consider it innocent fun, but really, is it really is? And the part of the issue is that when you knock on people's doors that you don't know what you're exposing your child. And plus, there are people that try to harm children by putting sharp things in blades and things of that nature. I mean, if you're going to go trick or treating, take your children trick or treating. Make sure that your children don't eat any of the candy until they get home, so the parents can observe and take a look. And if there's any candy that looks like it's been altered or whatever, just get rid of it. And before of course, my cyber daughter um is scheduled a stream for midnight tonight, dealing with the whole situation regarding Charlie Kirk. Okay, and I know people still talk about him. All I'm gonna say is I never heard about him before, and we all have to take an accountability for our actions. And what we learn from his deletion is that our words and actions have consequences. And with that being said, we're going to get into the main topic. Now, before we get into the topic, let me just state that the link to join the panel has been pinned. Should anyone at any time wishes to hit that link and opine regarding the topic in hand, they may do so. However, if I never seen you before, if I never heard from you before, I will insist that you camp up in the backstage to make sure that no one tries to flash any pornographic images, which wants the people of YouTube to take down the stream. Now, once I've seen that you're not going to do anything like that, that you're going to abide by the rules and guidelines set on this platform, then you'll be allowed on the panel. Okay. Now, as I stated before, people hate for multiple reasons. But let's just state, first of all, let's just state an overview when it comes to hate. Okay. Hate arises from a complex mix of personal experiences like trauma and betrayal, psychological factors such as fear, insecurity, and projection, and social conditioning from family and culture. It is a learned behavior often responsive to feeling powerless or threatened, leading to a profound, enduring dislike for a person, ideal, or group. Factors like envy, learned prejudice, misinformation, and a perceived threat that to one's in group can also fuel hatred. Now, we have seen a perfect example of hatred grown to such dangerous level of consequences is what happened in the Nazi state of Germany prior to World War II, where they taught to hate anyone that was not a pure Aryan German. As a result, millions of people um, were persecuted and eventually deleted. And of course, it's because of hate, which led to the Holocaust, of which 6 million followers of the Jewish faith were unfortunately deleted, and many of them in the most horrible way. Not only did 6 million Jews were deleted, but also millions of others, those who were physically disabled, those who were mentally ill, uh, and other groups of people were considered less than human. This country, the United States, has a history of hate. Okay, and it all started in 1619 when they began forcing African people to come to the United States to work as slaves for 250 years. In fact, in our Constitution, a black person was considered three-fifths of a human being. And a whole group of peoples from Africa were subjugated to slavery, um, cruelty. Women were raped. Families were separated. So it caused a great deal of trauma. Not to mention our treatment of the so-called indigenous people in the United States, where virtually every treaty that we have held, we have violated. Okay. Also, the fact that the indigenous peoples were treated as second-class citizens. Another example is Japanese Americans that was placed in internment camps during World War II out of fear. Okay, fear that they will betray the United States and side with Japan. That was the result of massive hysteria and hate regarding people who were different. And of course, there have been um, crimes, violence committed against the LGBTQ community. Now, as much as I might disagree with their philosophy, I must disagree with how they see how they viewed gender roles and things of that nature. No person deserves to be singled out for to be to be violated. So let me just discuss the psychological roots. Okay, when it comes to hate, fear of the other or different, including fear of aspects of oneself, can be a significant driver of hate. And when it comes to dealing with people who we don't know, there is a fear of the unknown. Okay, there is a fear that a particular group will harm them, attack them, and things of that nature. And that's based on misinformation. Another psychological root is insecurity. Unless insecurities and feelings and inadequacy can lead to projecting those feelings onto others who are, who are then hated for embodying dislike qualities. Okay. And again, a lot of it is based on one's exaggerated case, also based on misconceptions and myths regarding other people. Okay. Projection. The unconscious tendency to attribute one's unwanted traits or fears onto another person or group, essentially saying, I'm not terrible, you are. Okay. And of course that is based on assumption, which is anyone who's different is automatically bad. And of course we also experienced that after September 11th, where people of the Muslim faith and Arabs were picked on, looked upon as terrorists without any justification, all because they worship, they worship Allah, all because of their religious belief and other such practices. Another psychological root is powerlessness, feeling of powerless or past experience of being mistreated, humiliated, or injured can trigger hatred as a response to a perceived lack of individual power. Sometimes a person can be triggered due to a bad experience with one individual, and then that person will attribute that to the entire community. One of the things I've said before, and I will continue to say, that you cannot paint a whole brush. You cannot condemn to the entire community because of the actions of one person. Okay. Now there are also personal and experimental factors. Past trauma. Experiences like betrayal, bullying, or infidelity can accumulate, foster resentment, mistrust, and a protective mechanism of hatred to avoid further hurt. Sometimes people who hate, they use it as a defense mechanism to make sure that no one can hurt them. So what they're thinking is, I'm gonna hurt that person before that person hurt me, and it's based on experiences, bad experiences from one person. Okay, and I'm gonna say a personal example. Um, my first girlfriend was African American. She left me for one of my friends. Now I don't hold the view that all African American women are bad. Okay, I'm not gonna blame all of them because the actions of one person. Okay, because we are all accountable for our actions, both good and bad. So I was fortunate that I didn't let my that experience with one person to cloud my vision to think that all black women are the same. Because we all that's not the case. Failed expectations and disappointment. Unmet expectations, particularly in relationships, can lead to hatred, especially if the person is unable to forgive or accept the truth. Now, one thing we have to bear in mind, and this is something that um, it's trickling to some people, which is forgiveness. Okay. Some people have the tendency to believe that forgiveness automatically excuses the behavior, and it does not. My definition of forgiveness is when you reach this state that the negative words or the negative actions no longer have the same effect on you or hurt. And yes, you can forgive a person and not have anything to do with the person again. Okay. Now, the problem when you hate someone and you're not willing to forgive a person regarding the harm that they did, it becomes a cancerous flux. It affects your mind. It affects your spirit. You start to harbor ill will, and you start to wish the person who did the action or the word harm. And what you're doing with that hate, you're not doing anything towards the person, but what you are doing is you create an untreated trauma for yourself, and it will affect you mentally, physically, and spiritually. Jealousy and envy, wanting that someone else and has seen the success as unfair, can fuel feelings of envy and can develop into hatred. People can have jealousy about why they appear to be doing well and you're not. And of course, there's many factors. Okay, so unfortunately, there's some people they're not at the stage when they're able to sit down and reflect why they're not being successful. It's easier to blame another person. It's easier um, to be envious of persons for their success instead of just sitting down and reflecting what you need to do for self improvement. Now, there's also social and cultural influences, and these are factors that create hate. Learned behavior. Hate is not an innate emotion like sadness or love, but a learned behavior shaped by social conditioning, misinformation, and exposure to prejudice. One thing to bear in mind: we are not born with hate in our hearts. Hate is taught, okay? Whether it be because of our parents or our friends or our peers, okay? To hate another person or a group of people. Okay. And again, we're seeing the consequences of hate left unchecked. Throughout history, there have been groups of people that have been persecuted out of hate, out of ignorance. Christians were persecuted by the Romans for about 300 years. Um, a lot of it because of fear, a lot of it because of ignorance, a lot of it because they don't know, and of course, people create false narratives. Another social cultural influence is in-group, out-of-group theory. People instinctively turn to the in-group for survival when feeling threatened or by perceived outsiders, fostering aggression towards the out-group. And of course, we've seen this where um, people who are different in many ways, they're treated with disdain, with hate, with anger. And that's been exhibited towards Latinos, that's been exhibited, that's been done to the African American community, that's been done to Asians, that's been done to the indigenous people, people of different religious affiliations, and even people of sexual, of a different, based on their sexual orientation. There have been people that have been attacked and deleted simply because they speak a different language or speak with a English with a dialect or uh, because of religious intolerance directed towards these individuals. Society values. The world culture that promotes competition and violence can be normalized hatred towards the different, limiting empathy and understanding. Well, I mean, some people are raised in a culture where it's dog eat dog, survival of the fittest, that they don't care what they need to do, if they have to walk over people in order to achieve their goals. And of course, misinformation. Disinformation and conspiracy theories can contribute to hatred by creating negative images and stereotypes of certain groups. And unfortunately, we have seen stereotypes, particularly when it comes to the African American community, where you have the minstrel shows, where you had white people uh, basically in dark face, blackface, um, sharing, performing a gross exaggeration regarding the way that African American people speak and how they react. And of course, another stereotype is regarding the Jewish people that uh, they care too much about money. Okay, and unfortunately, a lot of that has to do with misinformation and negative projection. Okay, so let me just take a look and see. Uh, my apologies. It says that I have to make sure that every now and then that I can see if anybody watching on Instagram. So now what I'm gonna do is just give me a moment. Okay, just give me a moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the physical effects of hatred, okay? Because it does affect your health. So I'm going to just share with you each one. And there's also psychological effects of hatred. Increased stress hormone levels. Hatred triggers the release of stress hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline, which can lead to increased heart rate, blood pressure, and inflammation. So all of a sudden, the adrenaline gets flowing because you're starting to um, react negatively towards anyone that's different. Weakened immune system. Chronic stress caused by hatred can suppress the immune system, making individuals more susceptible to infections and illness. So, as you can see, hatred also has physical consequences to your body. It can affect your body to the extent it makes it harder to fight out disease and germs of that nature. It can also lead to digestive problems. Hatred can cause stomach upset, nausea, and other digestive issues because you're allowing those to be led by emotion. Headaches and migraines. Stress hormones can also contribute to the headaches and migraines. Muscle tension and pain. Hatred can cause tense muscles and pain, particularly in the jaw, necks, and shoulders. So, as you can see, these are the physical effects when it comes to hate. So, now I'm going to be discussing the psychological effects of hate. Anxiety and depression. Hatred can lead to feelings of anxiety, depression, and paranoia because you're forever in defense mode, expecting an attack from people that you don't know and people that you fear. Obsessive thoughts. Individuals who harbor hatred may become preoccupied with negative feelings which can interfere with their daily lives. Unfortunately, with some people, hatred can become an obsession. Okay. And people think about it 24/7. Reduce empathy and compassion. Hatred can make it difficult to empathize with others and reduce compassion. And the reason behind that is that because when you hate, you lose the ability to see others as human beings made in the image of God. Increase aggression. Hatred can increase the likelihood of aggressive behavior both towards the object of hatred and towards others. That's when hatred is allowed to go unchecked and you're acting against people simply because they're different from you. Damage to self-esteem. Hatred, holding onto hatred can damage an individual's self-esteem and sense of self-worth. Now, it's important to note that specific effects of hatred on the body can vary depending on the individual, the intensity of their hatred, and the duration of their negative emotions. If you're struggling with this intense hatred, it's essential to seek professional help to manage those feelings and protect your physical and mental well-being. So, if you're being obsessed with hatred, it might be time that you need a therapist, to deal with the root why you have hatred towards a particular group. Okay, so let's go share one more thing. And of course, when it comes to hate, as a Christian, I'm going to share biblical verses. The Bible addresses hate primarily in condemning it between people. In 1 John 3, verse 15, and Leviticus 19, chapter 19, verse 17, also teaching believers to love their enemies, as in Matthew chapter 5, verse 44, it describes hating evil as a positive introvert, exemplified by Proverbs 8:13. And also the world will hate believers for their faith. It's just experience and warn us about faith in Gospel of John, chapter 15, verses 18. Now, now let's discuss hate, Bible verses among people in the negative. In 1 John chapter 3, verse 15, whoever hates his brother is a murderer, and you know that no murderer has eternal life remaining in him. Now that's a powerful statement because if you hate a brother, that means you wish that person ill will, and there's no life in you. In Leviticus chapter 19, verse 17 states, "You should not hate your brother in your heart, but you should surely rebuke your neighbor and not bear sin because of him." So in other words, don't hate people. You can hate the action, but don't hate the person. And in Proverbs chapter 10, verse 12 says, hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all wrongs. And what's the definite opposite of hate? Love. And of course, as Christians, we are told to love our enemies. It does not mean fellowship with our enemies. Okay. It means love our enemies and we pray for them. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 44, says the following. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Now, of course, this is contrarily opposite to what the world teaches you. The world teaches you to strike back on your enemies and get revenge on enemies. But we're taught to pray for them. Okay? Pray for them that they'll see the error of their ways. Pray for them that they realize that hatred is not the answer, but the answer is love, and that the only perfect example of love is God through. Now, in Luke chapter 6, verse 27 says, but I say to you who hear, love your enemies and do good to those who hate you. Now, for quite a few people, that's a huge stumbling block because how do you do good for people that hate you? Okay? You can pray for them. You can love them and not have anything to do with it. Basically, you're not going to wish ill will because of people that hate you. Okay? Because hate is a fruit of the adversary. Now, we're going to talk about hating evil, the act of evil, not people, but the act. In Proverbs chapter 8, verse 13 says, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil. I hate pride and arrogance and evil ways and perverted speech. So it's talking about hating the actions, not people. Okay. And uh, okay, and what are the examples that's being cited in this verse? Pride, arrogance, evil ways, and perverted speech. So let's talk about pride. Okay. There's nothing wrong with having when you value yourself as an individual. The issue is when you have pride that you boast yourself, that you think of yourself, and that yourself becomes an idol. Arrogance is when you brag and you're thinking that you're bigger than what you are, that you're better than what you are, and of course perverted speech, basically when say using your word, your tongue to say things that are the opposite of what God wants us to say. And of course, the world will have a certain amount of hatred towards believers. In the Gospel of John, chapter 15, verse 18, says, if the world hates you, know that it hated me before it hated you. Now, when he's talking about the world, he's talking about the political systems, the philosophies of the world. Okay. One thing, we are called to be in this world, but not a part of the world, because the world runs opposite to what the Bible teaches us. The Bible tells us to get back at people. We're taught to pray for them. And one thing we have to bear in mind that the rain falls down on all people, not just the righteous people, but those who are not righteous. The sun comes out on all people, whether you are righteous or not. Oh, and in First John chapter 3, verse 13 says, do not be surprised, brothers, that the world hates you. And if you allow yourself to be consumed by hate, when you die, um, you might end up spending eternity away from God's presence because of hate. Just check and see. So just give you an idea um, regarding hate. Okay, and unfortunately, um, hate has existed um, throughout without history, and of course, the Bible records the first deletion where Cain deleted his brother Abel. Okay, and of course, Cain dealt with the consequences of his deletion. Also, for hundreds of years, the children of Israel were made slaves. They were persecuted. They were mistreated simply because they were different. And again, the whole situation with the African American community, where their ancestors, many of them came to this country against their will, and they were deprived of their culture, they were deprived of their language, they were deprived of their freedom, they were deprived of everything that made them unique and special. And they was exploited. Okay. And the women unfortunately raped. And of course we go and of course let's not forget the history of World War II, where millions of people were deleted simply because they were different, because they spoke differently, they believed differently, they lived differently, they have a different set of moral beliefs, things of that nature. Well, just because may have different belief systems does not um uh, uh, excuse people doing harm simply because they were different. Okay, so let me just okay. So I have been talking for almost an hour. Okay. So again, the link to join the panel has been pinned. Should anyone wishes to hop on and discuss their feelings regarding the topic. If no one um, join me in the panel or there's no comment, then I will start to wrap this up. Okay. And unfortunately, with the current administration, some people felt emboldened to express their hatred towards others more openly, which is an unfortunate result of last year's election. Now, in all fairness, things would not have been that much different if Kamala Harris was elected president. There might have been, some differences, but not many major. Okay, but unfortunately, we're living in a day and age where people are able to express hatred towards others openly. There's always been people that express hatred secretly. Now it's out in the open. And being that no one is going to join me on the panel, um, I'm going to start to wrap this up. As I stated, um, hatred, it's not someone that people are born with. It is a learned behavior based on misconceptions, based on stereotypes, based on misinformation regarding others. And sometimes it's based on one negative experience towards a member of that group. So now they treat everybody in the group the same way. It is unfortunate. Okay. And it can have physical consequences regarding your health. And also there's spiritual consequences to hatred. Okay. It can cause you eternally separated from God's presence. Okay, because what is the opposite of hate? Love. Okay, so how could you be a Christian and hate anyone simply because they look different, or they speak differently, or maybe they worship differently than you do, or maybe they have a different set of moral values. Okay, we should all learn um to be respectable with everybody, regardless of what is their religious views, regardless of what are some of their philosophies, regardless how they perceive things. Once we're able to, to be tolerant of others who are different, the better we will be. So I will be live tomorrow night on my other channel, where I'm going to be discussing the funeral customs of Latinos. So I'm just going to share my knowledge regarding that. Okay, and of course the playback end, you're more than welcome to do your thing. Just please be mindful that try to keep your comments respectable. I have no problem with people disagreeing with what I believe, as long as you can keep it respectable and not get emotional. Okay. Once you get emotional, you have already lost the argument. And of course, Thursday I will have another episode of open discussion. For those of you not familiar, what I do is I will share my views regarding multiple topics. The audience will have an opportunity to share their views. Also, if they wish that I discuss something, I will do my best to comply. If it's something where I'm not knowledgeable about, or I'm not comfortable to share, I will be um, transparent and state something. And of course, if you have not done so, please consider subscribing to the channel. Make sure that you set the notifications to all. So therefore, whenever I do produce content, you will have the opportunity to catch it live or catch it on the playback. And of course, um, I'm going to close with what were the usual remarks that when I choose to close with. We must do everything possible to avoid the presence of the mentally and intellectually challenged, because if we fail to do so, we would be infected by the stupidity and blessed insanity. This has been another episode of Uncommon Sense with Jose Negro. And whatever you say or do to the glory of God. In other words, may your thoughts and may your actions be the type that could give praise and glory to God Almighty, because it's He that allows me to live every day. It is He who's forever with me, guides me, okay, and correct me when I'm in error. And I choose to acknowledge God in everything that I do. So, with that being said, to say enjoy your evening, Happy Rosh Hashanah to our members of our friends of the Jewish faith. So take care, stay blessed, and peace.